противостоянии этим угрозам Россия также предлагает свое содействие. И мы заинтересованы в самом тесном сотрудничестве между правоохранительными структурами и специальными службами Российской Федерации и стран Африки. Настроены и в дальнейшем вести подготовку военнослужащих и сотрудников органов правопорядка африканских стран в российских специализированных учебных заведениях.
African countries are becoming united when it comes to kicking out Western troops and ending military bases. Until now, the West has used various threats to make African leaders scared enough to allow military bases in their countries. However, just recently, Russian President Vladimir Putin made a deal with African countries. And it's not just about training African countries' armies so they can handle the security situation by themselves. Rather, it's about completely making African countries independent, self-sufficient, and free, as Prigozhin had said when he was deployed to Africa. After this, Russia and China will do something that will make the Western world jealous than ever before.
Работаем. Температура плюс 50. Все как мы любим. ЧВК «Вагнер» проводит РПД. Делает Россию еще более великой на всех континентах. А Африку еще более свободной. Справедливость и счастье для африканских народов. Кошмарим ИГИЛ, Аль-Каиду и других бандосов. Берем на работу настоящих богатырей и продолжаем выполнение задач, которые были поставлены и которые мы давали обещание, что справимся.
So, what's the new deal Putin has made with African countries? Let's know about that in this video. But the first question is, why do African leaders allow Western troops and bases in Africa? African leaders frequently endorse foreign military presence in their countries in response to either perceived or genuine terrorism threats. Extremist groups, insurgencies, and regional instability pose formidable challenges to the security and stability of African nations. Faced with these threats, African governments find themselves lacking the necessary resources, capabilities, or expertise to effectively combat terrorism. However, the reason why African countries lack capabilities is because it was done intentionally to them by the Western world. Consequently, African leaders seek assistance from Western countries, which often possess more advanced military capabilities and intelligence-gathering technology. However, despite the initial portrayal of foreign military presence as collaborative efforts to combat terrorism and bolster security, it also served broader geopolitical agendas for Western countries. By establishing military bases in Africa, Western powers can assert influence in the region, safeguard strategic interests, and counter the influence of rival powers. Nonetheless, inherent in these partnerships lies the risk of exploitation. Western countries provide military assistance without adequately empowering African nations to develop their own counterterrorism capabilities. This tactic does wonders for the West, while joint exercises, training programs, and intelligence-sharing initiatives may occur. There is always insufficient emphasis on fostering sustainable indigenous capabilities. This approach leaves African countries dependent on Western support for their security needs, perpetuating a cycle of dependency. What's more, the presence of Western troops and bases in Africa bears significant implications for regional security and sovereignty. While it may contribute to enhanced security and stability by deterring terrorist threats and supporting counterterrorism operations, it also presents risks and challenges. The presence of foreign troops can strain relations with local communities and governments, prompting concerns about sovereignty and autonomy. Moreover, reliance on external support impedes efforts to develop indigenous capabilities for addressing security threats, perpetuating dependency and undermining sovereignty. To address these challenges, it is imperative to prioritize capacity-building initiatives that empower African nations to develop their own capabilities for addressing security threats. And that's precisely what Putin wants to do. What if Africa could have a united army that can be deployed instantly to African countries? Well, it will resolve all the problems African countries are facing. One operation at a time in every African country can end terrorism from the continent, and Putin's New Deal with Africa is similar to this. Over recent years, Russian President Vladimir Putin has actively pursued stronger diplomatic ties with African nations, marking a notable shift in his foreign policy agenda. At the forefront of this diplomatic outreach are significant agreements brokered by Putin with multiple African countries, focusing on the training of their military forces. The overarching goal of this pact is to cultivate robust African armies capable of unified action in combating terrorism across the continent. Putin aims to promote the emergence of an autonomous African military force, addressing persistent security challenges while reducing reliance on foreign military presence. Central to the deal between Russia and African nations is the focus on equipping and training African troops for counterterrorism operations. Putin wants the development of resilient African military forces capable of swift and decisive responses to terrorist threats. And he simply wants to end Western influence in Africa that discourages other partners from independently collaborating with Africa. The emphasis is on fostering solidarity among African states to collectively tackle shared security concerns. By harnessing collective resources and expertise, these African armies aspire to effectively combat terrorism and restore peace to regions plagued by unrest. The primary aim of Putin's agreement with Africa is to establish a self-sufficient and formidable African military entity. That's a groundbreaking idea that has been imagined before but never implemented. This united African army would possess the autonomy to conduct operations independently, free from external intervention. Putin's objective is to empower African nations to take charge of their security affairs, reinforcing Africa's sovereignty and reducing dependence on external military assistance. This marks a significant departure from the traditional reliance on Western powers for security support. A notable advantage of Putin's initiative lies in its potential to facilitate rapid and coordinated responses to terrorism across Africa. Instead of relying on Western troops and taking their favor, Putin wants African countries to have their own powerful and well-equipped armies. By consolidating African armies under a unified command structure, the continent can swiftly mobilize to address security threats. This coordinated approach enhances the effectiveness of counterterrorism efforts and minimizes the risk of prolonged conflicts. Armed with a full-bodied and cohesive military force, African nations will be ready to swiftly eliminate terrorist elements and restore stability to affected regions. Furthermore, Putin's agreement presents an opportunity for African nations to enhance their military capabilities through advanced training and technology transfer. Russian expertise in military training and equipment can facilitate the modernization and professionalization of African armed forces. This, in turn, enhances their ability to confront evolving security challenges effectively. Through investments in enhancing the capabilities of African troops, Putin seeks to establish a sustainable solution to the continent's security challenges. Moreover, Putin's engagement with Africa carries broader geopolitical implications. By strengthening ties with African states, Russia enhances its influence on the continent and expands its strategic presence in key regions. This initiative enables Russia to assert itself as a significant player in African security affairs, countering Western dominance in the region. Furthermore, by advocating for the establishment of an autonomous African military force, Russia positions itself as a pivotal partner in Africa's pursuit of self-reliance and sovereignty. But does the deal only include military training? Well, unlike the West, which sells weapons only when African countries follow the West's order, Putin has decided to offer weapons and equipment unconditionally. It's the right thing to do instead of blackmailing African countries during a time when they need weapons to fight terrorism. The fact sheet from Russia's army games highlights a significant increase in the annual procurement of military equipment by foreign clients, including various African nations. Over time, Russia has maintained positive relations with several North African countries, particularly Algeria and Egypt. Furthermore, Russia has identified the Central African Republic and the Republic of Mali as strategic partners, solidifying their bonds through bilateral agreements on military technical cooperation. Notably, tensions have arisen within Africa between many French-speaking countries and France, contributing to a shifting geopolitical landscape where Russia seeks to counter neo-colonial influences. Russia's proactive approach involves providing military support to allied nations across Africa, Asia, and Latin America, often through the sale of advanced weaponry and military technology. During the army games near Moscow and Kubinka, Russian Defense Ministry officials engaged in discussions with various African countries, stressing the importance of enhancing their defense capabilities through military technical cooperation. Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. Reports indicate that approximately 10 African countries, including Algeria, Congo, Egypt, Nigeria, Sudan, and Zimbabwe, participated in the Army Games. Noteworthy participants included the Republic of Mali and the Central African Republic, where Russian private military firm Wagner Group deployed hundreds of military instructors. Brigadier General Mike Nicholas Sango, Zimbabwe's ambassador to the Russian Federation, highlighted the positive evolution of Russia's policy toward Zimbabwe. He emphasized the historical ties between Zimbabwe and Russia, dating back to Russia's support during Zimbabwe's struggle for independence in 1980. The Russian deputy defense minister held discussions with the Sudanese defense minister regarding security enhancement in Africa. During their meeting, both officials reaffirmed Russia's commitment to fostering cooperation with Sudan in bolstering security across the continent. Moreover, Russia has been forging closer ties with Algeria, signaling its intent to ramp up arms sales to the North African nation. Negotiations included a potential $1.5 billion deal for 50 Russian MiG-29 aircraft, with additional arms contracts worth approximately $500 million in the pipeline. Algeria, a significant oil-rich nation, constitutes 3% of Russian arms exports and is considering acquisitions ranging from fighter jets to ships and ground weapons. Despite its historical ties with the former Soviet Union, Algeria continues to procure arms from Russia, with recent contracts covering various military assets. President Vladimir Putin emphasized Russia's readiness to supply advanced weaponry globally, particularly across Africa, Asia, and Latin America, highlighting the superiority of Russian-made products over foreign rivals. Russia boasts an extensive arsenal, from small arms to combat aircraft and unmanned aerial vehicles, with many products featuring superior tactical and technical characteristics. But how has this deal been implemented so far? Well, Russia has already sent its troops to Burkina Faso, who have been tasked to train Burkina Faso's military. Therefore, perhaps Burkina Faso will be the first African country to be fully trained by Russian military officials, allowing Africa and the West to see how the same African military can do wonders if trained well. This shift towards Russian support reflects Burkina Faso's reassessment of its security partnerships, including its long-standing ties with former colonial power France. During a plenary session of the Russia-Africa Summit, Putin reiterated Russia's commitment to training military and law enforcement personnel from African nations at specialized educational institutions. He underscored the importance of addressing pressing issues like terrorism, extremist ideology, transnational crime, and piracy, expressing Russia's willingness to aid in combating these challenges and facilitating cooperation among law enforcement agencies and special services. Putin highlighted the ongoing training efforts, noting that military personnel from various African countries are currently undergoing instruction at Russia's Defense Ministry's higher educational institutions. Yes, the deal is already being implemented while the West is busy spreading propaganda. Putin emphasized Russia's dedication to bolstering the defense capabilities of African nations through collaborative efforts in the military and military technical domains, citing agreements on military technical cooperation with more than 40 African states. Additionally, Putin acknowledged the active involvement of African representatives in military technical forums and drills hosted by Russia, where they gained valuable insights into advanced weapon systems and military equipment. He recognized the persistent instability in many African regions, attributing it to the lingering effects of colonialism and the divisive strategies of Western powers. Therefore, the deal between Putin and Africa is to expel Western troops so African countries can independently choose their own partners. The reason why Putin is doing it so confidently is because he knows Russia is a more favorable partner for Africa than Europe or the United States. Surprisingly, South Africa has already started joint military training with Russia. However, it's facing scrutiny as it engages in military training exercises with Russia and China off the coast of Durban. Stephen Gruzd, head of the African Governance and Diplomacy Program at the South African Institute of International Affairs, emphasized South Africa's assertion of sovereignty and its independent foreign policy decisions. He highlighted that South Africa's involvement signals its determination to maintain friendships without succumbing to pressure from Western or other countries. The South African National Defense Force characterized the naval exercises with Russia and China as a multinational maritime exercise. These drills aim to bolster existing relations between South Africa, Russia, and China, facilitating the exchange of operational skills and knowledge among participating personnel. What's more, Nigeria and Russia have signed a powerful military agreement aimed at enhancing bilateral cooperation. The agreement provides a framework for Moscow to supply military equipment, provide training, and facilitate technology transfer to Nigeria, marking a milestone in the relationship between the two countries. The agreement with Russia comes amidst delays in a proposed U.S. arms sale to Nigeria, reportedly due to concerns about human rights abuses by the Nigerian government. You should know that since 2014, Russia has signed no fewer than 19 military cooperation pacts with governments throughout sub-Saharan Africa. These agreements entail commitments from Russia ranging from hardware provisions to training initiatives and collaboration in combating terrorism and piracy. In August 2018, Botswana and Russia pledged to collaborate on peacekeeping endeavors and military training. Likewise, Burkina Faso entered a cooperation pact focusing on countering terrorism, though the agreement has yet to be enacted. Burundi, during the same period, inked a deal aimed at joint efforts in counter-terrorism and troop training. Meanwhile, Cameroon confirmed military and technical cooperation with Russia in April 2015, as outlined by Cameroon's presidency. Niger and Nigeria, in August 2017, forged agreements covering military expert meetings, education, and cooperation on peacekeeping, counter-terrorism, and piracy efforts. In October 2016, Rwanda arranged for the supply of weapons and military equipment, while Sierra Leone, in August 2018, secured deals for the supply of weapons, military equipment, and technical assistance. But how is the West trying to sabotage this deal? In recent years, Western media, particularly in the United States, has increasingly framed Russia's engagement in Africa as a threat to the continent's stability and security. This narrative tends to oversimplify the complexities of Russia's involvement in Africa and perpetuates misunderstandings about its true intentions. Listen to what the American media is saying.
Sure. Thanks, Aaron. It's great to be with you. Yeah, this has been a long-standing problem that the Russians, through their proxy organizations like the Wagner Group, have been working to ingratiate themselves into these countries. It undermines the United States counterterrorism mission. It allows them to expropriate the natural resources of these countries, valuable natural resources, gold, including some that are essential for U.S. national security, like uranium. In Niger, for example. So it's a national security problem for the United States, but it's even bigger problem for all the people who live in these countries whose autocratic governments are now associating with what amounts to a private military contractor / terrorist organization like the Wagner Group.
In contrast, American military presence in Africa is often portrayed as benevolent, with aims to promote peace and security. However, upon closer examination, it becomes evident that Russian involvement primarily focuses on training troops and enhancing regional stability, while American presence raises valid concerns about sovereignty and long-term security implications. The Western perception of Russian presence in Africa as alarming is rooted in historical biases, geopolitical rivalries, and a limited understanding of Russia's objectives in the region. Since the Cold War era, Russia has been viewed through the prism of competition with the West, particularly the United States. This adversarial mindset has shaped Western views of Russian activities globally, including in Africa. As Russia endeavors to extend its global influence, Western powers, especially the U.S., have been swift to cast doubt on its motives in Africa. In reality, Russia's engagement in Africa is primarily motivated by economic interests, diplomatic outreach, and security cooperation. A significant aspect of this engagement involves the training of African troops and the enhancement of their military capabilities. Through bilateral agreements with African nations, Russia seeks to bolster regional security and stability by providing training and support to African armed forces, particularly in peacekeeping efforts and counter-terrorism operations. Contrary to the predominant Western narrative, Russian military presence in Africa does not revolve around establishing permanent bases or exerting control over African nations. Instead, it prioritizes promoting partnerships and mutual cooperation. Russian troops are often deployed on rotational assignments for training purposes, with their presence contingent upon the consent of host countries. Moreover, Russia's engagement in Africa is guided by a commitment to respecting African sovereignty and refraining from interference in internal affairs, in contrast to the colonial legacies that continue to influence Western approaches to the continent. In reality, American military presence in Africa raises valid concerns regarding sovereignty and the long-term implications for security. Despite the U.S. portraying its presence as aimed at promoting peace, stability, and counterterrorism efforts, the reality is more subtle. The U.S. maintains a network of military bases and installations across the continent, often without explicit consent from host countries. These installations serve as centers for intelligence gathering, surveillance, and drone operations, prompting inquiries about sovereignty and the potential for unilateral military actions. Additionally, the presence of American military forces in Africa has been linked to controversial counterterrorism operations, such as drone strikes and special forces raids. These actions have raised alarm about potential civilian casualties, human rights violations, and breaches of international law. Furthermore, the expansion of U.S. military infrastructure across Africa has sparked fears of a resurgence of neocolonialism, wherein African nations may become reliant on foreign powers for their security needs. What do you think? Can Russia offer a better alternative for Africa to deal with the security problems and be completely independent? Or do you think Russia will do the same with Africa, establishing bases as the United States, France, and other European countries did? In the comment section right below, share your thoughts on how the US and Europe would react to Putin's New Deal with Africa. Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.